All right, everyone, welcome to Entrepreneurship Hour. You are in the right place. All right, so as you notice, today happens to be High Five Friday, so turn to the person beside you, give yourself a high five. There you go. It is a scientifically proven fact that a high five adds 7 seconds to your life. All right. Now, I would tell you to Google it and check that, except right now is when you need to close your laptops and put away your phones. I am thrilled to have today's guests here today. I'm very confident you're going to enjoy hearing their presentation and interacting with them. But to introduce them, I'd actually like to invite Chris Gordon up. Chris is the director of the Wilson Project Center. You may know about the Wilson Center, but SkySpecs, our guest today, spent a lot of time there, and so I thought it would be appropriate to have Chris introduce them. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, well, you're obviously not here to hear me. You're here to listen to Tom Brady and Danny Ellis, who were two guys that I've known now for about 4 years. I started working with them in the Wilson Center when I first came here to the university, shortly after they founded a student organization, Michigan Autonomous Aerial Vehicles, that worked out of the Wilson Center. They're both obviously undergrads, and they got their grad degrees from Michigan Engineering as well, aerospace engineers with a focus on controls. So they learned a lot in the Wilson Center with all the other student organizations that work there about how to grow a business, but there's an important piece of that process that's missing from what the students in the Wilson Center learn, and I think they'll talk to you a little bit about that today. So Danny and Tom are a lot of fun, as Matt alluded to, and that's part of the experience of growing your organization, and so you'll see that as they talk to you today. But they've been very successful when they made the decision to move from the academic environment into the entrepreneurial space to create SkySpecs, the company they're going to talk to you about today. So along the road, they participated in the Techarb program here that's run through the Center for Entrepreneurship. They took advantage of some of the other resources here. They got selected to go to Techstars, which is another entrepreneurial incubator in New York. They won $500,000 from a Michigan innovation competition in 2014, and that's all part of about $3 million in seed funding these guys have secured up to this point for their company SkySpecs. So I can introduce them probably capably as the dynamic duo of drones, and that's a great way to remember them. But there's a couple things you should look for as they talk to you today that you're probably learning in some of the other entrepreneurial classes that you guys are doing. They've had a couple of really significant pivots in their experience to get to this point, which is probably a dirty word for them, but I think they're going to talk to you a little bit about that too, about how, you know, pivot isn't something that's really glamorous for you to consider, but it's something that a lot of successful startups will do, as I'm sure you've learned or will learn. And the other thing is they launched their company into a very challenging space full of government intrigue and impediment. And so they will probably also tell you briefly that if you had to start a drone company, this is probably the worst possible time in history to do it, even though it looks like a space that is absolutely wide open and brimming with opportunity. And so a lot of us now are dealing with a lot of that challenge as well. So hopefully they'll talk to you a little bit about that. So with no further ado, I appreciate the opportunity to introduce them, and so please meet Tom Brady and Danny Ellis.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Am I on? Oh, there we go. Perfect. I'm Danny Ellis. This is my partner, Tom Brady. We are the co-founders and CEO and CTO of SkySpecs, based here in Ann Arbor. Tom and I are both born and raised in Michigan from the west side of the state near Kalamazoo. Went to school here for many years. Both have degrees, too many degrees in aerospace engineering. And as Chris said, spent a lot of time building student projects. We never really could have forecasted that we were going to become entrepreneurs. It was never really our goal when we went to school, it just kind of happened. And we're here to try to help you guys today. So our talk is the abridged list of things that you hear repeatedly as an entrepreneur, but will never listen to because you have to learn them for yourselves. So why are we giving this presentation in the first place presentation?
So we're going to play a little bit of a game today, and we're going to start by, Danny and I basically are going to tell you a little pieces of our story as SkySpecs. From there, we're going to provide some sort of groundbreaking advice or piece of wisdom, hopefully. From there, you guys are going to tell us whether you think this is good advice or bad advice. And we'll actually tell you as well, did we listen to it or did we not? In some cases, we will regret not having listened to it. But you're going to do the same damn thing because I just said you're not going to listen to any of this until you learn it for yourself. So moving on, we'll tell you what we think. And then from there, of course, as 1% of any person engaged in entrepreneurship will attest, you might actually profit, maybe 1% of you.
So here's a quick background. As Chris said, this is us much younger at the Wilson Center, some goofy pictures, a drone that we built. And this is what we dedicated most of our time to from 2009 to 2012. And when I say most of our time, I mean like 50 to 60 hours a week. I skipped class a lot.
He did.
That's not good advice. Try to get good grades. But I spent so much time in the Wilson Center, as did all of us. And it was never to run a business. It was just because we wanted to have some fun. We wanted to build drones. This is long before people called them drones. And as it turns out, there was an international competition that we went and took first place in, and things kind of snowballed from there. So then in 2012, we had the opportunity to go on the Bay Area trip. How many people here either know about or have been on the Bay Area trip? So we hear from the Center for Entrepreneurship, like, hey, we're taking 40 students to San Francisco, and you get to pitch an idea for a company, and there's going to be a bunch of alumni there, and they're going to give you feedback. And I looked at Tom, and we looked at the other people in the room, we're like, hey, you going on spring break this year? And we're like, nope. Have you been to San Francisco before? No. Want to go on this free trip? Sure, why not? So we threw together a MAAV video, we applied, we got in, and we're like, well, now we have to actually put a pitch together. We've never done that before, and we kind of just like slapped it together on the plane ride out there, not having any idea what it meant to do to give a business pitch to a venture capitalist.
So we went to one of our advisors, and of course we kind of gave this presentation. We said, and just to find out what they thought. We didn't want to embarrass ourselves in San Francisco, and they told us one of the first things they said: "You've got too many people on stage. You can't have more than 2." So what do you guys think? Is this good advice or is this bad advice? Good advice. Raise your hand. All right. Ah, perfect. All right. Everybody thinks it's good advice. What do you think, Danny?
Well, so we went there and we put 5 people on stage. And the stage was maybe a quarter the size of this stage. We're all standing shoulder to shoulder. You can barely even see the slides behind us. And we're kind of like going in order of who's talking next and has nothing to do with what we're good at. Terrible, terrible, terrible idea. Do not put more than 2 people on stage. Typically put 1 person on stage. Something like this, we're bouncing back and forth, so 2 works well. But do not put 5 people on stage. It's a terrible idea.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to look like the Backstreet Boys. Probably before most of your time. I know it's right about at mine. So, the next piece of advice. You 100%, you don't want to make your slides look good. You really need to get to the point. And that's what investors care about. What do we think? Good advice or bad advice? Some undecided. What do you think, Danny?
So Tom and I were engineers, and we were always taught, get to the point, black and white slides, bullet points, lots of text. So that's what we did for our first pitch. And it is terrible advice. You actually need to market yourself. It needs to be sexy. You want minimal words on there, and you want to be able to tell your story in front, like from you. And if you can convey the story, other people are going to follow along. They're going to understand, your vision and want to be with you. If you're giving them bullet points, their eyes are going to glaze over, just like your eyes glaze over in class, and no one's going to want to actually invest in you.
And the last piece of advice, when it came to this sort of birth of SkySpecs at the Center for Entrepreneurship Bay Area trip, they said that we had a few people tell us, well, your investors want to know what they're actually going to get out of this investment, so you should put your the return on their investment in your slide deck. That way they'll know it's a good opportunity. What do you guys think? Is this good advice or is this bad advice?
Well, it looks like they're getting some good training here.
Yeah, this is good.
So we were told, put return on investment on there. And so we show up to a VC meeting. We've got this slide. It's like, we're asking for this amount of money, and your return on investment is going to be X times. We immediately almost got kicked out of the room. It's terrible advice. They looked at us and they're like, this is our money. We're the experts here. Like, you shouldn't be telling me what I'm going to get a return on my investment. And they do not want you to do that math for them. So don't embarrass yourselves. Do not put return on investment for your future investors in your slide deck. So then we stumbled through kind of the Center for Entrepreneurship Bay Area trip, and we come home and we sit in my kitchen and we're like, all right, let's make a business. What do? We went online, we filled this form, and this is the picture of the first form in March of 2012 that got sent to the state of Michigan, turning us into a real business. And we were quite excited. We think we went out for drinks afterwards, and then we're like, well, hey, we own a business now, but what does that mean? And then we kind of had to figure out from there where we were going next. So we then joined Techarb, the local incubator here.
So I'm sure most of you have probably heard of Techarb, right? So Techarb is, of course, sort of like a business incubator, business accelerator, whatever you want to call it. You take a bunch of investors, you take a bunch of mentors, and you take a bunch of entrepreneurs, you put them in a pot, you stir them, and hopefully what comes out is chili. I don't know. So the first piece of advice we got when we landed at Techarb, and a little bit of backstory here. So when SkySpecs, when Danny and I were in our undergrad, we were working on the student group Michigan Autonomous Aerial Vehicles, designing everything from scratch. We had built this really cool autonomous drone that could navigate buildings and whatnot. And we went on thinking, you know what? We have gotten so good at building things that are cool. Let's just take our things that are cool, and we should go sell those to people. Someone will want our things that are cool. So people told us, you can't be a solution looking for a problem. How many think this is good advice? Obviously, yeah, okay, I figured a lot of people would say that.
Yeah, so we ignored this advice for a long time. We kept responding that, well, drones are cool, it'll sell itself. We're just gonna keep building the best drones. We know what the best drones are going to be. And we ignored this advice for probably a year and a half. Do not ignore this advice. Find a problem to solve, then solve it in the best way possible. Don't try to make something cool and force it into a problem. We got lucky along the way. We found that inspection was a huge market that needed drones. We kind of forced our way in there. We failed a few times, found some good customers that actually worked, but then we ended up destroying everything we were working on anyway in order to work with that customer. We could have saved ourselves a lot of time and hassle if we had found the problem first and then built a solution. Unfortunately, we thought drones were cool, and as most engineers, you get so tied to your product, you never want to let it go.
And of course, a lot of people have friends that are business people and lawyers and accountants and this, that, and the other thing. And almost invariably, when you start a business, you need these services, of course. So if I've got a friend that's an accountant, I want him to make some money or her to make some money, so I'm going to refer them. What do you guys think? Do you suppose this is good advice or bad advice coming from your family and your friends? Good advice. Bad advice? Okay, good.
So we went down that road, and it is definitely bad advice. You want to find people that have done this before, and just because your dad is an accountant doesn't mean he is a startup accountant. Just because your uncle's a lawyer, he might be a divorce lawyer. He doesn't know anything about the startup world. So don't just go hire someone because their title says lawyer or accountant or anything else because you know them. You want to find the right people that have done this before and can really help you.
And for Danny and I, we actually went through about 3 lawyers and 2 different accountants before we finally found a pair of those 2 things that really works well with us. And as he said, the most important thing is go do your own due diligence. Don't necessarily go based on what's worked for other people in the past. Go meet with accountants, go meet with lawyers. Don't just take the first recommendation that comes across your desk, because chances are it's not going to work out all that great for you. And of course, the next piece of advice, maybe this one's obvious. You should hire a good lawyer, right? Yeah, good advice? Yeah.
So this one's kind of a trick question. You should hire a great lawyer. We tried to spend as little as we could on our lawyers, and we ended up spending more and more and more and never getting anything done before finally getting rid of our lawyers, as Tom said, twice, and finally finding a great lawyer. That great lawyer is incredibly expensive per hour, but the work they do is phenomenal. You spend less time with them because they do such great work, and they've got a proven history. They know people, they know how to get things done for you, and they also know how to look out for you. When they see something coming that's bad, they're going to intervene right away and say, hey, you know what, we really need to go do this instead. Let's not go down this other path. Don't waste your time with cheap, bad lawyers. Go get a great lawyer. It should be one of the first things that you pay for if you are going into a new business.
And what we've also found with, especially with lawyers, a lot of the ones that deal specifically with startups, they've already got templates and things like that for all the documents that you'll ever need. And even though they cost more per hour, they don't spend as many hours doing it because they're really good at it, and they've done this before. is Norm in the room? Norm's not in the room. Okay. So when we were in Techarb, this was a piece of advice that we always got. So as I mentioned, we were a solution looking for a problem. We had really cool drone hardware. We had really cool drone software. We were trying to find somebody to buy it from us, and we kept hearing, "What are you guys doing? You're a software company, right?" Like, so what do you guys think? Was this good advice for us, or was this bad advice for us?
Kind of mixed, just like we were.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were told this over and over and over again, and we kept looking at each other like, no, we build drones. We don't want to just work on software. Sure, we know how to write software. Yeah, software is a piece of this, but we can't just sell our software. And this is before DJIs were all over the world, and you couldn't just upload your software like you can a phone to a drone somewhere. And so we kept telling everyone, no, we're not a software company. We're not a software company. And we said that for a good 2 years. As it turns out, we're a software company. And had we just listened to that, we could have gotten so much further in that 2 years where we were forcing ourselves to be a hardware company. Now, we thought hardware was awesome. We loved building it. We wasted probably $300,000 trying to build the coolest carbon fiber drone out there. As it turns out, the value we were delivering was through the software. We needed to find a way to deliver that. And I'm not saying that we had to just work on the software. We clearly needed the drone to be a drone company. But there were other ways to get pre-existing technology and put our software on it as opposed to building everything. You've all heard the phrase, don't reinvent the wheel. Really take that to heart. Only work on the things that you are actually adding value to. Don't rebuild everything that someone else has already done just because you want to do it. If you want to do that, make that a hobby. Don't turn that into a business. The next piece of advice along with that.
Not only are you a software company, you should just boil all of this down to making an app. Right? Like, apps are cool. Maps are worth billions of dollars. Just look at WhatsApp, of course. What do you guys think? Was this good advice for SkySpecs? Good advice? Bad advice?
So for us, while we are a software company now, many people were like, well, why don't you just build the app that people can open up their phone and push a button and the drone shows up? And we're like, well, the world isn't to that stage. You still need to get the drone and actually put the software on the drone. And it's the entire industry is so brand new, it wasn't like phones. Everyone doesn't have a drone. Actually, real quick, who owns a drone?
Wow.
2 years ago, you would maybe have one hand in the audience. And so when we were going through this problem, we were like, we can't just put it on the internet and people aren't just going to go to the Apple store and download our drone app because there was nothing to do with it. So this was bad advice, and it was forced down our throats continuously. Luckily, we did stick to our guns here and we said, you know what, we may be a software company, but that software is going on a physical drone. So our office is still full of drones. We just don't build them anymore.
And the thing to take away from that isn't necessarily that you shouldn't build apps. No, we're not saying that by any means. What we're saying is that there's right times for apps, there's wrong times for apps. For us specifically, in our situation, it didn't make any sense. So you really have to think it through on your own. And then, of course, this is going to be, I assume, this is going to come up repeatedly in this class. And by the time the class is over, you're probably going to be really sick of hearing the term customer discovery, if you're not already. We got the advice, you need to do more customer discovery. What do you guys think? Good advice? Bad advice?
So we were pretty tired of discovering our customers. We were pretty certain that we knew what they wanted. And we were an enterprise company. We were going business to business, B2B, and we figured if we had one customer, we were doing great. So what do? We found the Michigan Department of Transportation. We're like, hey, they're huge. We ended up talking to Federal Department of Transportation. We're like, if we can sell to them, we don't need any more customers. Well, that didn't work out very well. We never actually sold anything to them. We diverted completely, and we didn't have any other customers that we knew anything about. And so we jumped into a whole new industry, found one customer, then we're pretty happy. We're like, hey, we got this other great customer in the wind industry. We don't need any more customers, at least until we deliver our first product. And so we were adamant to not do customer discovery. In Techarb, in every accelerator we ever participated in, they were like, hey, this week you have to do 120 customer interviews. Next week, another 120. Next week, another 120. In those accelerators, we probably did one per week. This is wonderful advice. You have to get all this data from your customers, because just because they're telling you something does not mean they're going to give you money. Until they give you money, they're not really a customer. You have to keep asking everyone you can get your hands on what they would pay for until you can actually get them to pay for it. pretty much put development on the back end until you have got all the answers to these questions. And even after you're developing, keep asking them.
Yes, and another piece of that too is that for us early on, with the answers we were looking for, were what industries are we even looking for customers in? And we're still doing customer discovery to this day. And when it comes to wind turbines, for example, we're starting to understand what's the difference between a customer that services wind turbines versus a customer that owns them versus a customer that just happens to get power from them because it is in their backyard. So you have to keep iterating on your customer discovery, keep diving in, keep trying to get new answers. I'm sure you'll find them if you just keep looking. And then, of course, by this time we had decided, if we're going to make this into a real business, we need to have real money. Danny and I had graduated, and we actually needed to be on payroll. We needed to raise money. And the advice that we got was, if you're going to raise money, you're going to need a business plan, because investors aren't going to invest in you if you don't have a business plan. Good advice. Bad advice.
All right, this is one that you guys got wrong, because this is terrible advice. Do not waste your time building a business plan. There might be some people behind the curtain getting mad at me for this advice, but I cannot tell you how many hours we sat going back and forth, late nights, weeks on end, making 25, 50-page business plans that were probably never read. Instead, one-page executive summary, a very well put together pitch deck, and then an actual plan that you're executing on, which is not a business plan. Too often, 30 seconds after you are signed, sealed, and delivered on the business plan, you're doing something different. And also, if you look back, 5 years and you're still doing the first business plan you ever wrote, you probably missed a lot of opportunities because you wrote it, you stuck to it, and you didn't go talk to your customers. You didn't kind of move with the industry. You don't need to put something down in 25 pages and waste your time doing this. Spend all that time actually going and working on your product, talking to your customers, and launching with your customers. We have so many business plans that are sitting in files somewhere that hours went into that were never actually used.
Yep, they say no business plan survives first customer contact, and it's 100% true. And then, so we finally got some traction. This was our seed round back in 2013. We raised our first round of funding. It was led by a traditional venture capital, but followed by a whole bunch of angel investors and other friends, family, and fools, as they say. So we were looking to raise a $500,000 round. Our lead investor pushed back and said, "You guys need more money. You're going to need $600,000." So we said, "Fine, we'll raise $600,000, but we don't want to dilute too much. We want to keep as much equity as we can." And by the time we were wrapping up fundraising, we had on the order of $1 million ready to deploy. And we were actually telling people, "Hey, can you back off from the $50,000 you want to invest, come down to 25 so we can make room for some other people." Our lead investor, of course, told us, you shouldn't be turning down capital. What do you guys think? Was that good advice or was it bad advice? Good advice. You should never turn down capital. Is that good advice or is it bad advice?
This is great advice. Do not turn down capital if it's available, because you never know when something's going to come along and it's no longer available. We went through this multiple times. So we raised the $600,000, we were thrilled, we hired some people, we started moving forward. All of a sudden we're looking at the bank account and we're running low. Now, later in the story we'll tell you how we got out of that, but even after we got out of it, we were running low again shortly thereafter. And we spent many months just trying to raise our Series A instead of working on the business, instead of going out with our customers and actually growing SkySpecs. We spent from February in 2015 till November raising our Series A. All of that time could have disappeared had we just raised more money in the beginning. You also don't know what your competitors are going to do. One competitor comes along that is doing exactly what you're doing, and investors aren't interested in you anymore. So when capital is available, take it. Build your team fast. Do whatever you can with that money to move fast. Do not say no to it. And don't get greedy over the amount of percentage of the company that you own. If you're going to be an entrepreneur through your career, you're probably going to do this multiple times. You're going to learn over and over and over again. Eventually, you may hit it big if you get lucky. Otherwise, be happy with the small successes and share that with everyone that's willing to support with you.
Yep, and of course you have to be reasonable too. I mean, don't take $40 million if your company is just starting off. Unless, of course, you're in the Silicon Valley, and that's okay. I don't know. It's not okay here. It might be okay there. And then the next piece. So we raised a round of funding. We wrapped it up. We closed on $600,000. Like I said, even though about $1 million was available, people told us you need to hire You need to hire very slow, and you need to fire very fast. They said, don't let the money go to your head. Don't just bring in a ton of people right away because you're going to burn through it too fast. What do you guys think? Is this good advice, or is it bad advice? What do you think?
Definitely good advice. And I'll let Tom continue here. So we got all this money, and we're like, great, let's hire everybody. So we did. We put a huge team together right away.
Absolutely. We put it together an enormous team. We had people doing circuits, doing structural design, doing software design. We were trying to do everything because we were building the whole drone. We didn't really understand what it meant to have a minimum viable product, which don't throw up in your mouth just yet. You're going to hear that term about 1,000 times as well. But this is what our team looked like. And actually, if you could click next, this is what's left of it. What's interesting here is like we know and love every single one of these people on the team. We're still in contact with every single one of these people, and we hope that they're doing really great things in their current career now. The problem was just that we didn't understand completely as a company what we were doing just yet, and yet we went on this massive hiring spree before we really even understood what our customers needed. So that's really what we're cautioning you against here. And then here we go. I promise we're only going to bring it up once. You have to build a minimum viable product. We've heard that 1,000 times. Is this good advice? Is it bad advice?
So it's definitely good advice. And in this cake example, I'm gonna actually stress this. Before you go and build a wedding cake, you have to prove you can build a basic cake. And so we were like, great, let's go do that. And we actually took this advice, went and built our minimum viable product. Don't worry, the hard hat was actually not part of it. It was just for the photo shoot. But we went and we built this entire drone. And we're kind of alluding to this already. We already told you we're a software company. We got out of building drones. But we thought that this was our minimum viable product. And every time someone asked us, we're like, yeah, here it is. Look, it flies. It's great. And we didn't realize.
But really, they said that's not a minimum viable product. You have to build a minimum viable product. And what did that mean what that meant for SkySpecs, we'll get to shortly, but we just want to reiterate, this is good advice.
This is great advice. You may not even realize that your minimum viable product is 5 stages down the road from where you actually need to be. Simplify, simplify, simplify until it is actually minimal.
And then, of course, you're an entrepreneur, you don't want to get in too much trouble. People told us you should ask permission before you do stuff. You don't want to get in trouble. Is this good advice? Or is it bad advice?
As an entrepreneur, you don't have time to wait. Ask for forgiveness instead of permission. This is advice that we have lived by since day one. Don't wait around for people to give you the thumbs up. It's your business. You're the only one that's going to be there in the end, so push as hard as you can. Now we have a short example of this. Some of you may have heard it. This video I'm about to show you is not on the internet. Well, I guess this lecture is being recorded, so maybe it'll show up on the internet. But it's not on the internet right now, so you can't go Google it. This is the one exception of asking for forgiveness instead of permission, is dealing with the government when you may be arrested. So don't do it then. But back in 2014, the university was celebrating 100 years of aerospace engineering. And they had 15 airplanes set to fly over the football game on September 20th. Some of you may have been at that game. And so we talked to the athletic department and said, how cool would it be if a drone was the 16th aerial vehicle? We could use our drone and fly the game ball into the football game. And they were like, yeah, that's great, let's do it. And we're like, all right, perfect. And you know, we weren't really sure. It was kind of a gray area if it was legal or not. So we're like, all right, well, let's go get a hobbyist. We're a commercial. Flying drones commercially wasn't allowed. So we found a hobbyist. We said, hey, Mr. Hobbyist, do you want to do this for us? And he was like, yeah, sure. He's a Michigan alum. He's like, I'll go fly this drone. So we got the hobbyist and we started practicing. We set up this whole system, which I'm going to show you here. And if we could click play on this video. So this short video was shot by a professional film crew of this little vehicle, the little Michigan football helmet. It was streaming through the helmet to the big screen, had that all working. And what was going to happen was this next shot of it running down the field, and it was going to drop the game ball off to the referees on the center of the field with 110,000 people watching. Well, this is the one scenario that you should probably get permission from the government, because we did not, and they called us about 18 hours before the game and said, you were not allowed to do this. I personally got a call from Washington saying, we will fine you $100,000 and arrest all of you on the field at the game. And so we said, all right, well, we better not do that. So we stopped, and we did not do that. So I will say, the advice of ask for forgiveness works great unless you are about to be arrested.
Don't get arrested.
So don't do that.
Anybody recognize this movie? Yeah, it's Forgetting Sarah Marshall. So again, you could see in that football video, we still had this entire drone, and people told us once again, you're doing too much. You need to focus on what really matters. And I think by now most people would agree. Is this good advice? Of course it's good advice. Yeah.
But we still didn't get it. So even though through this whole presentation we're trying to reiterate, figure out what your customer wants, build the minimum viable product, and make sure it's minimal. Don't let your emotions get involved in what you want to build. And so we were forced to finally focus on one piece.
And why were we actually forced to focus for real? You guys have heard of Techstars or Y Combinator? Yeah, a lot of people have. So again, those are business accelerators, a lot like Techarb, just for probably companies that are a little bit further along. So SkySpecs got accepted into the Techstars RJ Accelerator powered by Techstars. They're very specific about that. In New York City for the October 2014 through February of 2015. I had never been to Manhattan before, but apparently the space is much smaller there. You don't get as much space for pretty much anything, no activity space. So here I am in a U-Haul. I've got all of the equipment that we brought from our 1,600 square foot warehouse, and we had a lot of equipment. We were in a hardware company, right? We had all of our equipment in the back of this U-Haul. We arrive at Techstars, and there is about half as much space as was in our entire warehouse for 10 teams, and we had all of our stuff, and we show up, and they're like, what are you going to do with all this?
We had a room about the size of that piano, actually, to put all of our equipment in.
So we really had to figure out how to focus, and perhaps this was just we were just victims of circumstance here, but we didn't have room to be a hardware company anymore. So this is where we actually started to figure out, so we really have to be a software company. There's no space to do anything else. So we developed a concept we called Guardian. Guardian was a collision avoidance system specifically for drones, and it made it really easy to do industrial inspections, like wind turbine inspections or bridge inspections, whatever it might be. It was a self-contained module you could install on any off-the-shelf drone, and it just made it not crash into stuff.
So we started building this minimum viable product finally when we were at Techstars, and they helped us out like with branding and everything. So we went to this field and we built this video here where we were trying to crash this drone into Tom's head. And we're flying at full speed, and our collision avoidance that he helped build, so therefore he trusts it, doesn't hit him in the head. And this video was kind of our branding for quite a long time. And we went out and started selling this little piece to other people flying drones, and finally started getting some traction in the drone space. At this point, drones were everywhere. We went to CES and they were all over the place, and we were the one with the collision avoidance system. Now, we had our collision avoidance system about a year before DJI broadcast that they had one. So we were actually finally onto something that people cared about, people were willing to pay for, and that we could actually build in a tiny place in Manhattan and actually ship to customers around the world. This was a major turning point for us to finally get out of the hardware business. I say now we're about a 95% software because we still actually buy the sensors and install them on drones. So there's a little bit of hardware involved, but it's just out of necessity. If we could get rid of that too, we would.
So here we are at Techstars. We've got a team of 9, and we all feel pretty heavily involved in this company. We all feel that we're founders, and Techstars even enforces that by saying, like anybody who's at the Techstars program is a founder. And again, we had 9 people. Each of us cooks in the kitchen. See the picture? It's funny. So they told us you have too many founders. What do you guys think? Is this good advice, or is this bad advice?
So we kind of got it beat into us that we couldn't have 7 or 9 founders on a team, which also led to us being in meetings constantly because everybody wanted to know everything that was going on about every aspect of the entire business. I would take a trip to San Francisco, and I'd have to have 4 meetings about how the one meeting I had in San Francisco went, and it just was not scalable at all. So this is great advice, and basically what we have found is that you don't want to do a business necessarily by yourself unless you've been successful before. Having other founders to bounce ideas off of, to work through a lot of the early stage problems is wonderful. But you need to be very clear early on who the founders are and who the rest of the team is, and that's going to be the best recipe for success. So now, today it's Tom and I as the CEO and CTO, and we've got a phenomenal team with us. And ever since Techstars made us realize what everybody's role was on the team, it was like a light switch. All of a sudden, we were more productive than we'd ever been in our history. And if we had just taken this advice years prior, when we had originally heard it in Techarb, it really would have accelerated our growth. So be very careful about who you bring on as founders, and just define your roles as what everyone is supposed to be doing.
And also, while we're at Techstars, you guys have probably heard of the Accelerate Michigan business competition. It just so happened to be right in the middle of while we were at Techstars. So 12-week program Techstars is a 12-week program, and Danny and I were getting ready to leave for the Accelerate Michigan competition for an entire week. And our managing director at Techstars is like, "Are you kidding me? You're going to a Michigan business competition and you're going to skip almost a tenth of this entire course that you just moved your entire company to Manhattan to be a part of. You've got to be kidding me." So what do you guys think? Was this good advice that you shouldn't compete in business competitions, or was this bad advice? Good or bad?
So some of you may already know if you've heard anything about SkySpecs in the last couple of years. But this was definitely bad advice for us. Now, we have actually won many business competitions. Even if you don't win, I say compete in them, because you learn so much. You have to actually build a pitch, put it in front of judges, get critiqued, get yelled at, get kicked out of the practice sessions because you're not prepared, which we have done in the past. And we were actually fortunate to win a $50,000 prize at the Clean Energy Venture Challenge here in Ann Arbor. We won a few $10,000 prizes here and there, which paid for a few parts. But then when we left to go to Accelerate Michigan and we were getting all this advice to stop, it was terrible advice, because we ended up winning $500,000. This is how we got out of the original problem before of not raising enough money. So we were bone dry, we could not meet payroll, and then we won $500,000. So we were like, oh my God, thank you. We can actually get through Techstars, we can pay ourselves, we can keep doing what we want to do. As it turns out, we ran out of this money too. And that's when we had to spend many, many, many months fundraising. So going way back to what I said earlier, raise capital when you can. Not everyone is going to win Accelerate Michigan. We were very fortunate to do that. But back to the advice of business competitions, if you've got the chance to get into one, absolutely do it. It's a huge learning experience, and you might win the next $500,000.
So winning that business competition, actually, it helped us actually meet some meaningful milestones. We're going to try and wrap this up here in about 2 minutes, but this is sort of an example of what we were able to do following winning Accelerate Michigan.
So we can play the video here. So it's hard to see here with the lighting, but that's our tiny drone against this enormous wind turbine. And so we were finally got clearance from the FAA. We got permission, which was great. And we were flying, and you don't realize how big these are until you're actually out there. And so we're inspecting this wind turbine instead of a person hooking himself up and jumping over the side of it and rappelling down. And what we get from that, if we can play this video as well, is this shot of the wind turbine. And we've shown this to people through the wind industry, through the FAA. Everybody looks at this and say, well, that's not real, that's computer animated. And we're like, well, no, we were actually flying that close to the wind turbine, and this is the value of our minimum viable product, our collision avoidance system. With that collision avoidance system, we can hand this to almost anyone that has flown a drone before, say, hey, go inspect that blade, and they fly up and they can't crash it, and then they get this type of a video. This was an enormous turning point for us, raising our Series A and actually satisfying our first customer and getting out in the field to actually run a business.
And I'm just going to kind of breeze through this. Even with those customers, we got very confident very fast. We said, look at this awesome data we can make, and we can do it every time, and we can do 8 a day, and we can give you all of the data automatically, and all of this other stuff. We were over-promising on something that we couldn't deliver just yet, and we of course learned very quickly that
this is good advice. Make sure to under-promise and over-deliver, even when you've got success. You don't want to get too far ahead. Make sure to separate your company vision with what you're working on today. Don't tell everyone I'm making time travel, if that's your vision, and you're nowhere near it. They're going to come to you and want the final product right away. So just be conscious of under-promising and over-delivering and get that order right. So real quick, couple of pictures here. These are just some nice pictures of what we've done on wind turbines. And this is actually what we're looking for. This is the direct value that we have finally, this is the one piece we should have found 3 years ago, 4 years ago when we started the business of what customers want. They want that picture of damage on wind turbines. We spent so much time building drones. All we needed to do was get that picture and we would have had a successful company. That's what we're working on now.
And they said, well, if you're gonna have a real business, you need to hire some people that have done this before. You need to hire some gray hair. What do you think? Good advice? By the way, that's not the gray hair they're looking for. Bad advice.
So we've been told this a lot, and I would say this is bad advice. Now, doesn't mean you can't hire someone that's experienced. What you should focus on is hire people that are passionate about the business you're working on. Don't just hire them because they've got a great resume. If they're not passionate about your problem and your solution, they're either going to take you in the wrong direction or they're not going to really help out. Find people that are passionate. It doesn't matter how much gray hair they have along the way. That's who you want to be working with.
And lastly, the last 2 bits of advice here. You have to move to San Francisco. If you're an entrepreneur, you have to move to San Francisco. What do you guys think? Is this good advice? Or is it bad advice?
Now, we've had a phenomenal time raising money, running a business here in Ann Arbor, in the Midwest. There are many, many cities all around the country with great entrepreneurship. You do not have to move to San Francisco.
Yeah, we really want to echo, there's so many resources available right here in Michigan. Per capita, we actually do a lot better in terms of what's available to entrepreneurs. So keep that in the back of your head. If you ever need help finding any of those resources, reach out to Danny and I. And lastly, if you're raising money, you need to go to San Francisco. Again, reiterating, good advice or bad advice?
I spent 75,000 miles in the air this year trying to raise money. Most of our money, almost our entire round, came within 1 block of our office in Ann Arbor. Didn't really need to make all those trips. You do not need to go out there to raise money. There's a lot of capital available here. And like Tom said, reach out to us if you need advice. This is us with our Series A investor here locally. Venture Investors is our lead investor. And thank you for listening to this presentation. You probably won't take most of that advice, but we caution you, we have already not taken all that advice. So try to learn from our mistakes and please reach out to us with any other questions. I can't really tell what time it is, but if you've got time for questions, we'll be happy to take them now.
It's like 5 minutes, yeah.
All right, well, we'd like to thank Danny and Tom for their presentation. I'd like to invite Allie, one of our IAs. She has a question that she'd like to ask, and let's go from there. Allie.
Yeah, thank you both for coming out today. Enjoyed hearing your advice. What would be your advice on networking while you're in school? So I'd love to pose a question for the audience. Who here is in the College of Engineering? Can you just raise your hands? Wow, okay. Definitely a majority. How about the Ross School of Business? A few, okay. And Ellis and A? All right, so we have a little bit of a mix here. So how would you recommend these students network with each other so that when they're ready to start a business, it will be successful?
Not even with each other, with like literally everybody in the world. The only reason I'm successful is because I talk too much. I network like crazy. I never realized it was a skill that I even had until well after we started a business. But you never know who you're going to talk to, who knows somebody, or who is the person you need to either get to a customer, get to an investor, get to someone in DC for regulatory reasons. Keep those people close. Keep communication up. Like, you are always networking. You don't even realize it, but first impressions are everything. Everything you do is networking, and it doesn't matter how old you are. You can start networking right now. Everything you do is who you know. Really take that to heart.
Fantastic. All right. One thing I really appreciate about SkySpecs is they were, as you know, a student venture here. At the University of Michigan. They experienced a lot of the ecosystem that we have here. Many of you are student entrepreneurs also working on ventures, and to me they're an excellent example of a team, a venture that decided to make their venture actually real. That it wasn't just about talking or showing. They got they tipped their toes in at the beginning and then worked really hard, saw that they had something that was real, and then scaled it up. Such an impressive example that we can follow as entrepreneurs here at the University of Michigan. Let's thank Danny and Tom one more time. And we'll be around for a few more minutes after. If you want to ask a few questions, then you're welcome to come up here.
And if you don't get a chance, we are in Ann Arbor. We're local. So if you want to swing by our office, it's on 4th Avenue, or just shoot us an email.
Thank you.
What do you have in stock? And they said, we've got this great blue gingham. You know, we'll send it over. I think it'll look great as a shirt. So we said, fantastic. Send it over. Shirts were made. Came to us. Looked a little bit more like a tablecloth than it did a shirt. And we got to the point where we said,